Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to part 1 of our cube set review for Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. We're going to be covering all the white cards, the blue cards, the black and the red cards. Part 2 will come out in a couple of days where we will be going through everything else, so do make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you're notified when that video comes out. For anyone unaware, me and James, who you'll know from the previous set reviews, have started a podcast called Powerful Nothing. If you want to get these set reviews early, or if you just want to hear two friends talking about magic, I'd highly recommend checking it out. But anyway, with all that out the way, let's get into the set review. All right, I think it's time to kick off. James, how's it going, dude?
Yeah, pretty good. Up north, visiting the mighty town of Chesterfield, known as Ches Vegas to some. Party town of the north.
I want to know who it is known as that.
Well, you can take it with as much or as little irony as you like. Yeah, no, pretty good, man. Pretty good. Got to play pre-release, so know the cards a little bit now. Yeah, good. Psyched to talk some Lord of the Rings. It was pretty good.
No, definitely, yeah. There's a bunch of cool cards in this set, and we're going to be talking about quite a few of them today. There is probably a mechanic we should probably talk about first, because it comes up a number of times on different cards, and that is the ring tempts you. So I'll kind of give the overview first, and then we'll kind of do a bit of a deep dive into kind of what we think of it. So a lot of cards will say, like, they'll have an effect, they'll do something, and then they'll have the words, the ring tempts you. What that means is that you get an emblem named the ring, if you don't have one, and then you choose a creature to become your ring bearer. If you don't have a creature, the ring still gets abilities, but it's not equipped to anything, as it were, if that makes sense. So the ring kind of has 4 stages that kind of each time you're tempted, it gains the next ability down, if that makes sense. So the first time the ring tempts you, your ring bearer becomes legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. So we've kind of seen that effect before. I'm pretty sure it's just Skulk. When you're tempted the second time, whenever your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. The third time you're tempted, whenever your ring bearer becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller sacrifices it at end of combat. And the fourth time you're tempted, the final and ultimate as it were, whenever your ring bearer deals combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. So they're interesting effects. Like, from experience playing with them, I did actually quite enjoy it. It was a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. Kind of, there's a lot of text on the dual-sided card that you get, but it actually played pretty straightforward. James, what did you think of the ring tempts you as a whole?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that, really. It was, I like that it makes you plan ahead a little bit in terms of what you choose as your ring bearer. I think it's inherently an aggressive ability, right? It punishes blocking, but I think it punishes blocking in a way where it will let you get through a board stall, but I don't think it really leads to snowbally games that finish super quickly. And I think, yeah, it was because of having this thing which isn't a dungeon but looks a bit like a dungeon. It was compared to things like Monarch and Initiative and whatnot, but it's a very different mechanic in how it plays out, because it can't really snowball. It's inherently capped. It is worth noting, you can't get more than those 4 abilities. Subsequent instances of ring tempt you are not completely wasted, because they will get you to move your ring bearer around, or if your ring bearer's died, you can choose a new ring bearer. I thought it played well in the limited format in terms of the payoffs for legendary creatures. Because obviously it gives you a legendary creature, so if you have enough ring tempting, you can quite reliably get there on those synergies without just hoping to open good legendary creatures, which, I mean, there are at uncommon, but you still have to get them. I thought that part played pretty well. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a super powerful ability. Obviously, the more instances that you have, the better it is. The first ring tempt is really not that valuable. And it does scale a bit better. I think specifically once you get to that looting is the first time you're really getting paid for this. But I thought it played okay.
No, definitely, yeah. The point you said there about this being quite an aggressive mechanic, I do actually very much agree with. Like I don't think slower decks or control decks want this mechanic at all. And one thing that we'll see as we go through the set review, and especially as we're looking at these for Cube, it's highly unlikely that there's going to be lots of the ring tempts you running around in Cube, unless obviously you're doing a set cube, in which case you're going to be recreating limited, where it's kind of, it was made for, there's lots of creatures or creatures and effects that tempt you. I think the main thing when I'm going to be looking at cards, I don't know if you're the same, James, but basically the ring tempts you is kind of a nice little bonus. The card already has to be playable, I think, to get in. And if it has the ring tempts you, then cool, that's a nice bonus. Like there's some cards in this set we're not going to be talking about. There's like a worse shock at sorcery that the ring tempts you. Like that I don't think is going to get in. Just giving you that one time ring tempts you effect isn't worth losing. Like it isn't worth just running a worse card than what is available to you. Because again, we say this with every set review, but we are comparing these to every other card available in all of Magic. So it is something to consider when we talk about them, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. It's also worth noting different creatures have different value as the ring bearer. It is much more of a buff to some creatures than others. Obviously, lower powered creatures gain a lot more off the skulk ability. As an opponent at pre-release, make the Moria Marauder the ring bearer, which is a 1/1 double strike, which you get a card when you exile a card and you can play it when you hit them. There being a ring bearer is phenomenal because you can only block it with one powered things. So unless you have a sort of 1/3 or something very specific, that's just going to get you cards every turn. Whereas making your 4/4 ring bearer is not that useful until you get to the later stages because most things have less than 4 power, so we'll be able to block anyway.
I agree, but because in my sealed pool I had the 4/2 Golem, and Golem is actually it's kind of flavorful, a terrible ring bearer. He's got 4 power, 2 toughness, lots of things can block and trade with him. And even when I had the ring on like a 5/5, that third ability, you're going to be killing things in combat anyway. It's less of a big deal. Kind of like one of the things with the third ability of if a creature can block it, it dies at end of combat, I guess would be trying to be trading up in mana or something like that. It's kind of a bit of a weird one there.
Yeah, I guess it's for if you have a 1/3, then they block it with their 1/3 that gets punished. But yeah, it's not. I have found that to very rarely get brought up. I guess it's good against double blocks or whatever as well. But yeah, I felt like that was the least relevant of the stages of the ring.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'd agree. Maybe one last thing I do kind of want to touch on is just there are a number of creatures in Cube that I do think would be fantastic ring bearers already. I am thinking of things like Goblin Rabble Master or those kind of effects. Just be able to get through with them, but they can't be blocked and your tokens are swinging in as well. That could be quite powerful. But I think it does lead you in more down the aggro route with these. Like there aren't as many creatures who aren't in red and white I'm super excited about at the moment, giving the ring bearer to.
Yeah, for sure. I think Goblin Rabble Master specifically is the problem is it gets a big power boost when it attacks.
Oh, that one's true. All right, yes.
But the other Rabble Master variants, like Squee, for example, I think are quite good ring bearers. The one I was particularly excited about actually was Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Ooh, okay.
Because it's giving you value every time you attack, and it's a 1/3, so they'd need like 3/1 power creatures to be able to kill it in combat once it has that skulk ability.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal ring bearer. Right, so I think that kind of covers our thoughts on the ring. Let's actually just kind of see how they are on cards. James, do you want to take it away with our first white card of the day?
Sure. So first up in white, we have Boromir, Warden of the Tower. It is 2 and a white for a legendary creature human soldier. It's a 3/3 with vigilance. And whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. And it has an activated ability of Sacrifice Boromir, Warden of the Tower. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. The ring tempts you. Okay, so quite a lot going on with this card. 3 mana, 3/3 vigilance. Quite easy to cast. Good ancient 2 mana. And is pretty solid, but an exciting body. The first ability scales quite nicely into very powerful cubes, though. Shutting down things like all the evoke elementals, shuts down all the forces, Force of Will, Force Negation. Obviously, you can get Moxen. That's less relevant because they've often come down earlier. but things like Mishra's Bauble, even a lot of the big Storm payoffs rely on you like casting cards for free. Things like Bolus's Citadel or Mind's Desire, something like Golos. These all, it blanks a lot of things sort of incidentally, which is quite nice. And then that second ability, we've seen this on Selfless Spirit, is pretty strong. It means if they have, Doomblades and whatnot, they have to kill this first. They can't kill your Hero of Bladehold, whatever 4-drop you played. They've got to target this. And obviously it's fantastic against sweepers. I don't think this adds up to it being like a tier 1 3-drop. I don't think this is better than Adeline, for example. But I think it's pretty solid. I think you could put this in most cubes and it would like see decent play in a White Weenie deck. I don't think I have any interest in it outside of White Weenie, really. I think that's realistically going to be its only home. The only other thing I thought of was if you want to go full meme, it does entirely lock out your opponent with Possibility Storm, which is quite funny. But probably not something you're realistically including.
No, but I'm going to lose to maybe you in that in Commander, aren't I? That's going to be it.
If only it was Boros, I could make it a Commander and play Possibility Storm. It'd be phenomenal. But yeah, I think this is pretty solid as a 3-drop. Not the most exciting card of the world, but I think it will be like better than it looks if you play it in Vintage Cubes as a 3-drop.
No, that's awesome. No, yeah, if I'm honest, I didn't clock the fact that it turns off Moxen. I kind of guess I thought that, well, the cost is 0, but yeah, you're not paying mana for them. That makes sense. Yeah, I could actually see that being fairly strong. Like, I think it does kind of depend on what the cube looks like around it. Like, do you think you need to be like pushing like a decent like Death and Taxes style thing in your cube for this to kind of see play, to kind of go in as one of those kind of like hateful creatures that kind of incidentally turns off things? Because like as you said, it like you listed other stuff it turns off, but it also like will turn off things like Rebound, I think, and like Hideaway. This will kind of hit an annoying, like more than you initially think in a cube, I guess. But
it'll be one of those cards where when you play with it, you don't realize how much work it's doing because you and your opponent's sitting there raging about all the cards that just don't work in their hand, or looking under their Shelldock Isle at their phenomenal game-winning spell. Yeah, I think it's pretty solid. I don't. Do you need to specific Death and Taxes build? I think you just need a aggressive white deck with cheap creatures. I think you want pressure on board before you cast this. It is unfortunate in a Death and Taxes style build, but it's actually kind of a nombo with Thalia specifically, which is obviously one of the sort of iconic cards of that deck. If you have, say, Force of Will, Thalia makes them pay 1 for that Force of Will, and then it works against Boromir.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess in those spots, probably like even in just White Weenie, you maybe want Thalia more. But yeah, it's
but I mean, I don't think that means you can't have both of them in the deck. It's just a thing that will come up sometimes.
No, that's fair. But up for Boromir. Yeah, looks quite fun. All right, let's take it away with our next one. Next up, we have Flowering of the White Tree. It is white and a white for a legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have Ward 1, and non-legendary creatures you control get +1/+1. So I do actually like this, but I don't know if most decks want this. Like Anathems are generally fine, but most white aggro decks would much rather just play a 2-drop on turn 2. But I guess maybe you are playing this later in the game once you maybe have a board state and this is kind of like your game-winning spell. But then because we're kind of comparing this to like all other cards in Magic, I think a card like Unbreakable Formation is just a bit better. That puts a counter on your whole team and then gives them Indestructible and Vigilance for that turn. This does get more interesting if you have tokens, as the power buff will be higher, just going wide, having more creatures. And then interestingly, that I do wonder if the legendary thing will come up, giving them +2/+1, and the Ward 1 could be quite nice. Like there are plenty of legendary cards that would want to go with this. Cards like, we've mentioned Adeline and Squee earlier. If you're running those instead of just normal Goblin Rabble Master and like Handwin Garrison, then this could have a place. this doesn't go in every cube, but I could see cubes that kind of have a token sub theme, maybe picking this as their anthem of choice.
Yeah, I can see. I'm pretty high on this card, to be honest. I mean, the days are gone where Glorious Anthem used to be a good card in Powered Cube, but this is a whole mana cheaper for a meaningfully better effect. The Legends thing will come up. There's just a lot of Legends in those decks. All the way up the curve, you have Kithian, Thalia, Adeline, and White Weenie decks do tend to go pretty wide. You can fall into a trap where you have too much of this stuff, obviously, and you can really only afford to have one or two of these cards that rely on you having a lot of other creatures in play, because their slots aren't taken up by cheap creatures. And you really do want your curve to be pretty low for this card to work out. But I think this is pretty solid, and it's a pretty resilient buff to your team. It will. They sweep your board, you still have this anthems while your future creatures are better. And the Ward 1, having these taxing effects does add up. Like, it's now 3 mana to Fatal Push or Thalia. That's pretty obnoxious. I think this card's pretty good in White Weenie, actually.
No, yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think it's what you said about finding the right spot for it, or how many of these you want to run. There is probably a place for just having an anthem in a lot of cubes in 2023. So maybe this could be the one.
Yeah, 100%. You're quite right. But I think it's not the card you want to be playing on turn 2, right? It's you want to go like 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 2 drop plus like anthem plus removal spell is pretty good, right?
No, exactly. And also I forgot Glorious Anthem was 1 white. I thought it was 2 and a white. So the fact that it's just it has the same restriction in terms of color pips, but it's just a mana cheaper. That is just good. It is a strictly better upgrade, I guess.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Glorious Anthem. Cool. Next up, we have Forge Anew. This is not a White Weenie card, fortunately. This is 2 and a white for an enchantment. When Forge Anew enters the battlefield, return target equipment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could activate an instant, and you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. I don't think I need to say this needs to go in an equipment deck, but this has a lot going on if you're doing the equipment thing. It doesn't go in your aggressive white deck that has 1 or 2 equipments in it. You really need to mean it. But the second 2 abilities are already really strong. The ability to equip at instant speed is surprisingly powerful. Anyone who's played with Leonin Shakiri can tell you it's you get to put it on the thing that they don't block and kill you, or you can put it on the thing they do block and win combat, and it makes combat an absolute nightmare for your opponent. It also makes like Lightning Greaves into you can't kill any of my creatures on my turn. This has quite a lot going on, I think, and that's before you even get to the top ability of maybe you're looting away your equipment, or they just counter it or deal with it in some way, and it's a nice reanimate for that. If you can find a way to put like a Cauldron Complete in your graveyard at the early turns, this could be really strong doing that. But and then the final ability is obviously great with things like Colossus Hammer that have a really high equip cost but are cheap to play. And that's obviously these aren't things that exist in most cubes, but I think they're printing more and more equipment payoff seemingly every set. So I think at some point you reach that critical mass, and this could actually be like a pretty good thing for probably Boros to be doing in cubes, is including a like equipment payoff package. I think each time I print these things, it just gets more and more redundancy, and that does become quite a nice aggro deck that has a lot of resiliency. The equipment decks, because they they tend to be great against people just killing your creatures, because yeah, every creature you make is going to be a huge threat when you have this and some decent equipment in play.
No, definitely. Yeah, if I'm honest, it's the top line of text that I'm most excited for. Like, this is another card that just kind of shows that I'm going to die on this hill, but I think Goblin Welder is the most improved Magic card for Cube in the last 3 or 4 years. Because if you're doing fair things with this is not where you want to be with this. Specifically, you want to be looting away a Cauldron Complete or a Batterskull, effectively kind of making like a Boris Equipment Reanimator deck. That could be quite fun. And then, and the other flip side of this is, maybe this does make Hammer Time playable in Cube. I think that we've spoken about that kind of, I think, in every set review we've done, this kind of Boris Equipment deck. And I'll be honest, it's normally me adding them, but you added this, James. So
yeah, I kind of think this is the best one we've had for a while. So that's the downside of it's not a creature, but it just does it all. Like the paying 0 to equip at instant speed is going to be an absolute nightmare to play against.
Exactly. It is just the first time you equip it each of your turns, but that's normally enough for the dodging a removal spell. Say you've got your hammer, your Colossus Hammer on your creature, they try and kill it. The first time, effectively, they need 2 removal spells to not be hit by the hammer. That's pretty strong.
Yeah, for sure. And once you have the hammer in play, you're all of your creatures represent that extra 10 damage, right? Because you can you can move it after blocks. Yeah,
it could be pretty scary. I think that might be something we have to kind of have a look at and have a tinker with in the next couple of weeks, or in the next little period. Because they have printed plenty of stuff for that deck recently, and we are probably reaching that point where it's a deck. So hooray, we love that. So next up, we have Frodo Determined Hero. It is 1 and a white for a legendary creature Halfling Warrior, and it is a 2/2. Whenever Frodo Determined Hero enters the battlefield or attacks, you may attach target equipment you control with mana value 2 or 3 to Frodo. As long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Frodo. So I added this onto the list. For me, the top ability, the mana value 2 or 3, is kind of flavor text. That's not massively why I added it to the list, because it specifically doesn't cheat the 3 big things that we mentioned a minute ago. It doesn't cheat Batterskull, Cauldron Complete, or Hammer Time would be the main one to it. It only does the ones that realistically you're kind of already fine paying anyway. Like I'm not sure if there's even many equip 3s in Cube, but like a few equip 2s will get in your swords if people are running them, that kind of stuff. So that does help with that. For me, the main thing about this card is that this is effectively on your turn, it's a 2/2 indestructible creature. That's a pretty solid body. Like, it's less punchy than like cards like Adonto Vanguard or Seasoned Hallowblade, but it is way more consistent. Like, yes, you can't protect it on your opponent's turns, but on your turn, it will always be able to attack. It will always be able to be swinging through. And yes, your opponent can block it, but in theory, you're playing White Tweenie. Maybe you have your Anthem. Maybe you have other creatures you're attacking with. This is just going to be some free, repeatable source of damage every turn. I think Frodo Determined Hero is pretty solid, actually.
I get where you're coming from. I'm a little bit lower on this, I think. I think the Adonto Vanguard comparison is a good one. I think I would almost always rather have the Vanguard, just because having that extra power both means it's harder to block profitably, and when it does get through, you're getting those extra points in. Obviously you don't have to play life with Frodo, which is nice, but Adonto Vanguard being indestructible on both players' turn and is actual indestructible, whereas this is just preventing damage. You can still Doomblade Frodo. It doesn't stop that. I think just makes Vanguard a much trickier card to play against and to deal with. Whereas Frodo, I think, just being a 2/2, you can. But there's a lot of things that will be able to block it pretty cleanly. Even quite early on. Obviously, you can't trade with it, but you can just put a 3/3 in front of it. It's not a huge issue. I think it's fine, but I think looking at the White Weenie 2-drops that are in most cubes, I don't think there's any I would cut for Frodo.
No, that's fair. Yeah, white 2-drops is quite a stacked section, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to break into if you don't have either an aggressive ability or I guess 3 power would probably help. But
yeah, the equipment thing I think isn't zero. Like, but the things, as you say, the swords are pretty bad these days, and I don't think Frodo is going to be enough to get you to include them. Certainly, mostly looking at like Umzawa Jite. If you're really going after the equipment deck as a one archetype, I'm just putting this into White Weenie, I think it gets a little bit better, but there are much better 2-drops for that deck as well. I think Pure Steel Paladin, Stoneforge Mystic. Even I think Leonin Shakira is probably a better 2-drop for that deck actually than Frodo. But a bit of redundancy there is not a bad thing at all.
No, all good. You want to take it away with our second Frodo of the day?
I will. Our second and I believe final Frodo of the day is Frodo Sauron's Bane. It is white for a legendary creature halfling citizen. It is a 1/2. Says you can play 2 white-black hybrid mana. So white-white, white-black, or black-black. And if Frodo Sauron's Bane is a citizen, it becomes a halfling scout with base power and toughness 2/3 and lifelink. Means that ability permanently. Think of a Figure of Destiny type effect. And then if can play black, 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 and if Frodo is a scout, so if you've activated the first ability, then it becomes a halfling rogue with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game if the ring has tempted you 4 or more times this game. Otherwise, the ring tempts you. So, the idea here, right, is that if you're going to the third stage, if that's what you're about, you're making it a 2/3 lifelink. You need to get in that. You need to then play your black, black, black. Get in with your 2/3. That needs to connect. Then the ring tempts you, and now your 2/3 is harder to block because you have the skulk ability, and you can just keep getting in with that, and eventually they lose the game, and you're looting all the time, I guess. That seems really unlikely to happen to me. Firstly, what Orzhov deck is this going in? Like, I don't know what the deck looks like that wants like this low impact, like low statted single white 1-drop and then can make black, black, black early in the game. That doesn't seem achievable to me. And then if you discount the third ability, then if you just activate the first one, then you've paid 3 mana for 2/3 lifelink. No, thank you. And then even if you do get to flip it, you've by this stage you've invested 6 mana. They can just fatal push the thing. They can still block it. It's not actually that difficult to block a 2/3 Skulk. I don't get it. I really don't get it. I might be wrong. Okay, but it'd be cool to have this photo be good, but I don't really see it.
No, I completely agree. I really want to like this card, but yeah, if you're in any kind of white deck, I think you'd probably just rather spend the 3 mana you could be spending to get a 2/3 lifelink on 3 generic 2/1s.
Yeah,
and just have 6 power on the board on turn 2 rather than do this. So I will say there is something this is one of the very few ways of getting repeatable ring temptation.
I don't believe activating the black ability multiple times gives you multiple ring tempts, because the black ability is if Frodo is a scout. Once it's resolved, Frodo is no longer a scout. It is now a halfling rogue.
Oh, it's even worse. Okay. Oh, so you already have to actually this is terrible. You already have to be tempted multiple times before you get to this point. You have to be tempted 3 times. Okay, this is awful. All right, my bad.
Yeah, so I think you have to hit them like.
Oh no!
Yeah, you have to hit them like 4 times with Frodo.
Well, this card is way worse. If I'm honest, don't play Frodo Sauron's Bane, I think is the hot take from this, because even in my magical Christmas land, it doesn't work. So, okay, let's move on to a much better magic card. We're going to move on to Reprieve. It is 1 white for an instant to return target spell to its owner's hand and draw a card. So this is White Remand. It's technically different. I'm not going to use the words better, but it is different. So this gets around effects that say spells can't be countered, that kind of stuff. Then there are niche things the other way where it doesn't get the benefit for something like Barole that kind of reduces the costs of counter spells. But anyway, this is a very good card. This is probably one of the best cards in the set. If you played with Remand, the tempo swing that you get from it is fantastic. You brick your opponent's turn while you get to draw a card. All that for just 2 mana. And the fact that this is in white, people will not be expecting this effect. Just like imagine, like this is not a super hard situation to kind of imagine that you are a white deck that's beating down your opponent. Your opponent casts the Wrath the turn before they would die to stabilize. You do this to it, they can't cast it again, and you win the game. Like that is not a super hard circumstance to imagine. But yeah, this is just a very good Magic card. We've had this in my cube since the day it was spoiled. Literally the moment it was spoiled, this was printed and went into my cube. It's also an uncommon, so it has a place, I think, in every cube that can run it. James, what's your take on this card? And do you think it's fair of me to say that this is effectively a staple now?
Yeah, this card's phenomenal. It's and really unique in white. I think White Weenie is probably its best home. If you've ever played with or against the White Weenie, splashing a little bit of blue for some counter spells was a very good deck in a lot of cubes.
Yes, the James and Josh special. I think that's known as.
Yeah. Well, you curve out, and the thing is, the aggressive white decks, they generally just need that one turn. If you can stop your opponent stabilizing for that one turn, you get to kill them, right? And this lets you do that without going outside of white, without stretching your mana base. And that's a really big deal because aggressive decks don't want to splash. You need white on turn 1. You often need white on turn 2. So getting access to this effect in within your base white color, I think if you're White Weenie, there are remarkably few cards you would take over this. I think this is pretty phenomenal, actually.
Yeah, I know plenty of people who have taken this pack 1 pick 1 in my just below like vintage power level cube. Like it's a very, very good card.
Yeah, I think that's generally going to be a pretty reasonable decision.
All right, awesome. Do you want to take it away with our last white card, James?
Cool, yeah. So finally in white, we have Samwise the Stout-Hearted. This is 1 white for a legendary creature, halfling peasant. It is a 2/1 with flash, and when Samwise the Stout-Hearted enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Return it to your hand, and the ring tempts you. Okay, so this could be a nice little value creature, I think. You can sort of think about it as a Snapcaster Mage for creatures. It's nice that it works at it's not gated by the size of the creature as a lot of these are, or the mana cost. It's whenever one of your creatures dies, you can flash in Samwise as a little raised dead. You have a body that can trade or get in, or you will find some utility for. The ring tempts you, I don't think matters very much here. It's going to be a rare situation because this is only one instance of the ring tempting you, so it's basically give a creature skulk. Obviously, you can come up with situations where it will matter and it's upside, it doesn't hurt, but I don't think it's a big part of the power level of the card. I think this mostly wants to go in, obviously, creature-based decks, but probably not the fastest. I don't think you want this in White Weenie because it's not the... on turn 2, this is not the 2-drop you want, right? It's mostly just going to be a 2-mana 2/1. That's not good enough. And later in the game, well, I'd rather be playing my Gideon on turn 4 than playing this guy for a bit of incremental value. But I think it kind of has a home in maybe more mid-rangey white decks. It's also worth noting you can get value out of this earlier. For example, like you can get back a fetch land with this. you can get back a bauble with this. There's a lot of ways to where you can run out on turn 2 and get your card right away, which is nice, but obviously just makes it a bit more flexible. I don't think this adds up to like the most powerful card in the world. I think it's gonna be like a niche role player, but I think it's fine. I think you'll find decks for it.
So I think I'm actually a little higher on this than you are. Just like a 2/1 flash body, I think is pretty solid. Like I don't think it's too hard to like imagine a situation where you flash this in on like turn 2 or 3 to block their creature coming at you, and yeah, you save your fetch land for their turn. If you're just doing that, if that's kind of like I don't think that scenario is super uncommon. If I'm honest with you, I think will come up quite a bit of time, and that seems pretty good for me. Like there's also the thing of kind of like obviously the higher case scenario of this could like protect your creature combo piece. You could bring it back to your hand if they remove it, that kind of thing. I think that's pretty solid. For me, kind of, I think the things are, especially in Cube, just like the creature types is going to be quite difficult. Like, no deck cares about a halfling peasant. Like, humans or soldiers or like warriors would be a bit nicer. But the legendary thing might mean it has a bit more play. I guess you can Caracas this back to your hand to do it again, which could be quite cool. But
that's really good, actually.
That could be quite fun. And then obviously we do have the, I guess, dream scenario of just like strip mining them repeatedly with this. Like double strip them with this.
Yeah, that's not bad. It's pretty phenomenal with Urza Saga as well, actually.
Ooh, there we go.
Because the second Urza Saga is kind of better than the first one,
yeah.
Right? It's it starts making 6/6s, 7/7s. Yeah, I could kind of see it being one of those cards where it has enough little things going on that you end up running it quite a lot. Yeah, certainly if you have enough fetch lands that you're going to be able to reliably get a card out of it on turn 2, it goes off a fair bit. Because I think you don't want to be playing it just as Ambush Viper too often.
No, exactly. You want to be getting a bit more value out of it than that. And yeah, ideally, I guess you do want to have another creature in play, like if you're doing the chump block thing, but because otherwise, if you block with this and it dies, you will have a ring token on or a ring emblem on level 1, but you won't have anything to put it on. You need to be tempted again to actually put it back onto something. Yeah, that part. Yeah, the ring tempts you. I think is probably going to be flavor text 90% of the time. But yeah, I'm actually tempted to try Sam. I might give this little chap a go.
Okay, that's fair. Sounds cool.
All right, well, let's move on to our first blue card. We're going to be talking about Birthday Escape. It is a single blue for a sorcery, draw a card, and the ring tempts you. So cantrips are cantrips. Cubes run these just as ways. They do just trigger so many things. Like they trigger your pyromancer effects. There's a spell in the graveyard for delve, all that kind of stuff. This is probably the worst one, I want to say. If you have more ring temptation, then this obviously goes up, but this is gonna be tricky when you're just comparing it because like all the other single blue cantrips do something else. Like they scry, they can draw you multiple cards. They just give you way more card selection, or some of them even mill you as well, which certain decks want more than this. I think Birthday Escape is a bit of a hard sell. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, I guess, of a card that's underpowered, and in theory the bonus is the ring tempt you. In Cube, just having a couple of these I don't think is going to be enough to make it work. And also this also kind of it isn't as good because the ring tempting you is not as like blue is not specific, is generically known as the aggro value beatdown color, that kind of thing. So I think the ring temptation has less play in those colors. There will be some creatures that will be good in it, but generally speaking I think this one's probably a pass.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's just quite a lot of blue 1-mana cantrips. You're not going to run all of them, and it's pretty hard to make an argument for this over really any of the others. No, even some of the weak ones. Like a lot of cubes don't go down to like sleight of hand, right? For example, they just have preordained ponder, maybe opt, but even sleight of hand is generically a much stronger card.
No, definitely. Like if I'm honest, so mine currently we have Brainstorm, Consider, Opt, thought, scour, careful study, ponder, preordain. So that is what 6 there. There might be a world where if you're in a 720 cube, this could get in as like the 7th one. If you're looking for it and you like Lord of the Rings, maybe that could be the way it goes.
Liking Lord of the Rings is certainly a valid argument for it. It's also worth noting, I was talking about Dreadhorde Arcanist earlier. This is kind of the card I had in mind. It's
really nice. Okay.
It is phenomenal. Like if you have Arcanist in play and you cast this, you get your card. You attack for Arcanist. You get another card. Your Arcanist has a free attack now because it is a 1/3 Skulk. Your attack swing with Arcanist. You get your second card. You get your Ring Tempt again, so your Arcanist now becomes a looter with Skulk. And then in subsequent turns, you can use that looting to set up for Arcanist that attacks even. It's pretty nice there. Because Arcanist is a card where a large part of the weakness of that card is it's quite easy to block normally. So I think that's quite a nice interaction. But I don't think that's really enough to justify including it over a generically better cantrip in cubes.
Oh, maybe not in cube, but maybe modern, James. Let's go.
Maybe modern.
Maybe modern.
Yeah, that sounds. I could throw away some play points with that idea. Yeah. Yeah. Next up, we have Fealty to the Realm. It is 4 and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When Fealty of the Realm enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And the monarch controls enchanted creature. And finally, enchanted creature attacks each combat if able and can't attack you. So you, in this case, being the person who cast and therefore owns Fealty of the Realm, not the person who controls the creature at the time. Yeah, this is pretty good. The same things that go along with all Monarch cards basically apply here. Introducing the monarchy into the game is you have to be confident that is going to work out well for you. If you introduce the monarchy and you can't defend the monarchy, that can be an absolute disaster. That can 100% lose you games you would otherwise have won. But this does go a long way towards doing that. It's you're gaining control of their best creature, and even if they do take monarchy back, that creature can't be used to attack you. But once they have the monarchy back, it is going to be fairly tough because that creature can't attack you, but that means it can be back on blocks, so it could then be very hard to get the monarchy back. But if you have this backed up with good cheap removal, so you don't get hit by their creatures or other cheap evasive creatures, so that you can take monarchy back if they do happen to take it, this can be a really strong card for sure. I'd say the only knock against it is if you're looking for a 5-mana mind control, it's really hard to look past Treachery. Treachery is like a significantly stronger card than this in terms of just how swingy it is on turn 5. 5 mana is essentially 0 mana steal your creature, which is insane. But you don't have to necessarily go for the most powerful option at each slot. This is an interesting card with some cool gameplay, I think. So very reasonable and include.
No, definitely, yeah. I do quite like this card, but yeah, like I do completely agree that just in terms of raw power level, like Treachery is super strong. I know Bribery is 1 more, I think, but obviously the effect is way stronger.
Bribery is 5 as well.
Bribery is 5, but okay, I stand by Bribery as a miserable magic card. I'm not a big fan of that one. I think one of the main things, if I'm honest with you, is like this is very splashable, unlike Treachery and Bribery, and like even like some of the other ones, like just generic mind control and stuff. But one of the things that this has going for it is like cards like Treachery are like $50 now.
That's an excellent point.
So like if this stays relatively budget, because obviously it was printed in the Commander precons, so it's currently you can get one. Well, the set hasn't come out at time of recording, so the prices are very weird. It's somewhere between 61 cents and $5. But as a relatively budget option. I think this one could be quite cool. And also just generally the Monarch is introducing that into games has in the past been quite strong. So
yeah, 100%. And you're in the deck that wants Monarch cards, this is going to be really strong. It's just worth noting there are going to be plenty of blue decks that don't want that effect.
No, definitely. Yeah. You do need, I guess, introducing the monarchy into a game. If you don't have that many creatures, that seems like a good way to give your opponent some card advantage.
Sure is.
All right, let's move on to our next and last blue card. We have Stern Scolding. It is a single blue for an instant. Counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less. So I think this card actually does quite a lot. I did a quick check, and this counters somewhere between half to 2/3 of the creatures in my cube. And that is a massive amount for just a single blue mana. So I currently don't actually have a single mana blue counterspell in my cube. We obviously have the free ones with Force of Will and Force of Negation, and then everything else is kind of at 2. Obviously Daze is also technically free, I guess. But yeah, I don't have many counterspells at 1, and this one could be quite interesting. Like, because this hits more than I thought it did, I think this one could see a place. Also, when I did that check, realizing that 2/3 of the creatures in my cube die to shock means I should probably just be running shock as well. But that's a separate conversation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the fact that it's power or toughness 2 or less really does open up the scope here. Like, it basically is going to counter most things that cost 3 or less, and even some more expensive stuff. You know,
and also like Kiki Jiki as well.
Yeah, Kiki Jiki, Solitude, Agent of Treachery. It's got some range, you know.
Urza Lord High Artificer has 1 power.
Sure does. Yeah, no, I think this is a pretty strong card. It is pretty matchup dependent. I think you can view this as if you'd want Fatal Push in your deck in the matchup, you probably want this.
That's a good shout.
But it is kind of, it lets you do a thing that blue normally doesn't get to do. You know, you get to, if you have this on turn 1, this is gonna stop you falling behind to creature decks. In a way that almost no other blue card does, not counting Dismember as a blue card here. It does kind of fill that role.
Dismember's a 5-color card, and we all know that.
Yeah, one of which is blue. Yeah, it's but yeah, no, I think this card's really good actually. Yeah, obviously you don't want it in every matchup, but I think it's certainly a card that I'm defaulting to. I'll start in my main deck and just board out when it's bad. I certainly wouldn't categorize it as a sideboard card.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, this is another one that I kind of, the more I think about it, the more I actually probably need to test. But yeah, I think Stern Scolding looks good.
Yeah, it's a nice one. Cool. So first up in black, we have Call of the Ring. This is 1 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. And whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So the tricky bit here is you get the ring tempt you regardless. You're going to move up your ring emblem, but you're not getting the card unless you choose something as your ring bearer. So you're not getting the card if you don't have a creature in play. That sort of limits limits the decks this goes in pretty strongly. I think ideally you want 1-drops in your deck in decent numbers. It could be fine in a deck where you play this, you don't get the card right away, and then you play a creature afterwards, and hopefully that survives. But I think ideally to maximize this, you want 1-drops in your deck. I don't really know where this belongs. Like, sure, if you have like black aggro in your cube, then maybe this is good, but those decks suck. So I don't know really where we end up. Maybe it's, if you've got like vampires in or something. Yeah, I don't think you want this really if it's if you're not getting your cards until later. It is also worth noting here that it's 2 life. 2 life is quite a lot, especially as a lot of the decks would want this use their life total in other ways as well. 2 life adds up really quickly. The difference between 2 versus like 1 for Bitter Blossom, for example, is pretty real. But I mean, it is a powerful effect if you get the train rolling early, and it will be pretty strong because you're buffing your creature a pretty meaningful amount. This will very reliably get you multiple ring temps on one card. That's actually pretty. There's not a lot of cards that do that. So if you kind of want the ring tempt mechanic in your cube, there's quite a nice way to do it, because it honestly doesn't play super well if you just doing it once. You do need those multiple instances of it. So it makes your creatures into better threats whilst drawing you cards. If you have the cheap creatures in play, that is quite strong. But it's just finding the right home for it, I think.
No, I think that's fair. So I did want to ask you, actually. So how do you think this compares to a card like Phyrexian Arena? Because I had a look on Cube Cobra, and apparently Phyrexian Arena is played in 30% of cubes above 541 in size, which is a little bit mad to me. But how do you think it compares to that?
I think when it's good, it's better. You're getting it for less mana, and you're buffing a creature, right? But it just goes in much fewer decks. Like, you can play Phyrexian Arena in your really grindy mid-range deck with a bunch of removal spells and discard and grind them out with a card advantage. This doesn't do that, because if you don't have a creature in play, you're not getting the cards. If you're only playing like one creature in the early turns, they can just kill that creature, and then they've kind of killed your Call of the Ring as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. It's a Phyrexian Arena that can be turned off. I guess it's not the reason you play that.
Yeah, for sure. But it could be nice potentially, I guess, as well in you can make aristocrats decks that have a decent chunk of 1-drops and like just churn out a lot of bodies, right? Like, this is actually nice with like Bitter Blossom and stuff, because once you're churning out sort of multiple bodies off single cards, you're always going to have something to choose. So I was going to be able to get your cards if you want. But again, that brings the downside of, Bitter Blossom is also costing you a life a turn. How many times can you afford to do this? I think when it's good, it's better than Arena. I will say I think Arena has been power crept a little bit out of a lot of cubes. I would not say it's better on average than Dark Confidant, for example.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like you probably take the same amount of life loss from both, but Dark Confidant also attacks and blocks, so that can be important.
It is worth noting you can just choose not to pay the life later. The life is optional.
Yes, that's true.
So it doesn't kill you in the way Dark Confidant does, but obviously at that point all you're getting is a ring tempt every turn, which isn't necessarily good enough.
No, exactly. And yeah, as you mentioned at the start, like, once you're past, like, this is one of the best ways to reliably complete or ultimate a ring, as it were. But once you've got past the fourth one, you don't need that anymore, basically. I guess there could be some play of it being nice, being able to move the ring around a lot. Like, if you play a better creature, you're going to be guaranteed to move it around. But at that point, just if you played a better creature, just kill them with that creature. But
yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on to our next black card. We have Golem Patient Plotter. It is 1 black for a 3/1 legendary creature, Halfling Horror. When Golem Patient Plotter leaves the battlefield, the ring tempts you, and it has a black. Sacrifice a creature, return Golem from your graveyard to your hand, activate only as a sorcery. So I don't think this goes in more high-powered level cubes, but this is an uncommon. And in Peasant Cube, I think this is actually really, really good. It's a recursive black aggressive creature, which you don't tend to get at uncommon. Most of the ones that have seen played in Cube are rares, like your Bloodghasts, all that kind of stuff. They're generally all rares. We generally don't see these effects at uncommon. So at that level, this will see a lot of play. It's also a sack outlet as well. It is a slow sack outlet, but just having more density on top of a body that I guess you also want it to die as well. So it fills multiple roles in an aristocratic deck. Could be quite strong. And then the other thing I was thinking about with this card is in those cubes, the first level of giving Skulk to a creature could be very impactful. There's cards like Bloodthrone Vampire, which is 1 black for a 1/1 that lets you sack a creature to give it +2/+2. If you give that Skulk, which is in the deck that would want to be running Golem, that is very scary because you can with those kind of cards that have low mana value to start with, but you sack your board to them, you can get through unblocked and then sack all your board to them, and it kind of gives you like a one-shot kill. So in those kind of cubes, I think the Ring Tempts could be quite good, and I think Golem is a very solid role player in that. Like I do think it is a niche card. Like you need those bits for it to work, but I think in Peasant Cube this could be a staple going forward.
Yeah, I could see that in Peasant Cube actually. It sounds pretty great. I like that both of the abilities here basically ask your deck to have the same things. Because you have to sacrifice a creature to bring Golem back, which asks you to have disposable, so presumably low-powered creatures, and those creatures coincidentally make good ring bearers as well. Because Golem itself, not a great ring bearer, it's got 3 power, but those, the random tokens that you presumably are making to try to enable your Golem engine, those will make good ring bearers. It's also, it is kind of nice Golem being a 3/1 because obviously you get the ability when Golem leaves the battlefield, and then you can use the second ability to bring him back. He doesn't innately sacrifice himself to keep that engine going, but being a 3/1 is 3/1s trade, they can't keep taking 3. So at some point they're probably going to have to trade for your 3/1, or even just eat it if you just want the ring tempting ability. Yeah, like not the quickest card in the world. It's I think comparing it to the other black recursive creatures, I think they have very different roles, because this doesn't put you up a creature, right? When you recur it, you're sacking a creature to bring back a creature. So it's not really an enabler for other sacrifice things in the way that a Bloodghast is.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
And the fact that it comes to hand and then to play means it's this isn't really an aggressive card because it is pretty slow, but it is going to be a lot of value. It's I think it's going to be quite good in the like more grindy sacrifice decks where you're getting your value every turn, you're chipping in with your ring bearer, you're looting, and then you start dealing them damage. And in those aristocrat decks, they're really good at trip damage, so that damage is quite meaningful.
No, it makes sense. Yeah. The little I played of the Lord of the Rings format, I've had Golem in both my decks, like in the Streamers Showdown thing we did and a pre-release, and I was impressed with it. It plays better than I think it reads, if that makes sense. Like I think if this is in your deck and you're doing the things that like the aristocratic stuff that we kind of mentioned, I think you will be happy with it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Cool. Next up, we have Golem's Bite. This is black for an instant. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So we have a Disfigure already. And has an activated ability. For 3 and a black, you can exile Golem's Bite from your graveyard. The ring tempts you, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a strictly better Disfigure. There's not really any scenarios where having that ability on the card is going to hurt you. It is a very, very slightly better Disfigure. The upside is pretty minor, but Disfigure's a very fine card. It's probably is worse than Fatal Push, but it's definitely on the next tier of if you want another single black removal spell. Disfigure's probably one. This I guess replaces that. So yeah, this is a very solid role player. Nothing bad to say about it. Not the most exciting thing in the world. It's not going to deal with big creatures, but it's going to kill the Llanowar elves. It can kill a Ragavan. It's it does everything you expect your 1-mana removal spell to do.
No, exactly. Yeah, completely agree. If you're playing Disfigure, swap it out for Golem's Bite unless you're Pauper, because Disfigures are common. That's the only thing. But yeah, it just gives you slightly more to do. Like, yeah.
Or you're a Lord of the Rings hater.
Cool. Let's take it away with our next black card. Next, we have Mirkwood Bats. It is 3 and a black for a 2/3 creature bat with flying, and whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So this is a very good creature. It's also a common, which is kind of a bit wild. there are just generally so many things that make tokens in Cube, either like creatures, which was obviously like the age-old one, but now there's so many sets where things make treasure, things make clues, things make food, things make blood, things make power stones. Well, there's more than I actually can think of. They are everywhere. So there's plenty of things to make tokens, and what's nice is that a lot of those tokens will sack themselves. I think this is a very strong card. The main drawback with it is that it is a 4-mana black creature, which means it's competing against like Grief and Shieldred and Yawgmoth. I think it's a good card, and I think in like the fact this could be tearing up pauper cubes is kind of scary actually. I think for more powerful cubes, this is my take. I think this card is good, but I'm someone who's currently running the artifacts sack section in black, and I'm not sure I want this. I think just because it's 4 mana, and that spot is very competitive.
Yeah, I think this has sort of got some crossover hype because people are very excited for it in Commander.
Oh, it'll be a house in Commander, yeah.
Yes. Each opponent is a scary line of text there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine card. I can see you doing some pretty sweet stuff with it. Like, if your deck has like Disciple of the Vault in it, then this is going to be a pretty good card for you. But it's 4 mana. It dies to a lightning bolt. It's a lot of the time isn't going to do anything the turn you play it, right? If you play this on turn 4, a lot of the ways you're either making or often the ways you're sacrificing those tokens going to require a mana investment, so it's not doing anything until you untap with it. I don't think this is a remotely comparable card to Shieldred, for example, on power level of the ones you said. Yeah, there's some combo stuff, but it's to actually go infinite. This is it's not the easiest thing in the world. I think this is a little bit overhyped for Cube personally. I could see it having some spots, but I think for powerful cubes, this is probably just too expensive for not enough immediate impact, would be my hunch.
Yeah, no. I think we're both kind of aligned with that take. But yeah. I think this will, in Pauper, this will see play, like maybe even Peasant too. But yeah, once you start being able to run rares, again, it's just like it is a good Magic card, but it's competing against the last 3 years worth of Mythics, and that's kind of the issue.
Cool. Next up, we have one I added to the list. This is Mordor Muster. It is 1 black for a sorcery. It says you draw a card and lose a life, and you amass Orcs 1. So this is the first time we've met amass Orcs. Similar to the amass mechanic from, I believe, War of the Spark. Except the only difference being that we are now amassing Orcs. So you put a +1/+1 counter on an army you control. It's also an Orc. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black Orc army token first. So if you've already amassed, if you control an army, you're just going to put a counter on it. And if you don't control an army, you make a 1/1. So this isn't 2 mana 1/1 draw card is a card we've seen a bunch of times. In green, you've got Elvish Visionary. In white, you've got Spirited Companion. And in black, you've got Dusk Legion Zealot, I believe the card is. 2 mana 1/1 lose life draw card.
Yeah, the vampire. That's it.
Yeah. The difference with this one is that it's a sorcery, not a creature. There's obviously upsides and downsides to that. You're not going to be able to flicker it, which you might want to with some of those cards. But there's also a bunch of upsides where you can flash it back for Snapcaster Mage. It can contribute to all of your spells synergies. Anything that counts instances sorceries in the graveyard, for example. And I like this as maybe a nice little crossover card between, say you have blue-black spells in your cube, but you also have red-black sacrifice. Well, this is going to be pretty good in both of those decks. So it could be a nice little glue card there. Yeah, not the most powerful, exciting card in the set, but I think could be a nice role player.
No, definitely. Like, I'm actually kind of a fan of the creature on a spell that gives you some value. Like, one of my unashamedly favorite cube cards is Hard Evidence, the one that makes you the 0/3 crab and you investigate.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Like, with that you get 2 tokens, but with this you get the card draw straight away, which is nice. Like, I've been impressed by Hard Evidence when I've run it, and I could see this filling that role. Like, it's just a solid creature. Oh no, it's just a solid card. Like, it just smooths out your draws, makes things a little bit easier for your deck, gives you a body. Like, I think it's solid. Okay, next up we have Orcish Bowmasters. It is 1 black for a 1/1 creature orc archer. It has flash, and when Orcish Bowmasters enter the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmaster deals 1 damage to any target, then amass 1. So this is a silly magic card. It's very good. My first thought of where this could go is something like the wheel deck, but I don't think it needs to go in that. I think the higher power level the cube, the better this is going to get. Where people are playing more like cantrips, you have things like Monarch drawing cards, all this kind of stuff. There is a world, though, where this is just fine. Like, not all decks do have extra card draw. This does just get rolled over by Stompy. You do get some value from it straight away. Like, it does ping something and make a body straight away. Like, this is 2 mana, ping something for 1, make another 1/1 as well. Like, the fact you get value. Like, I'm not saying this is a bad card at all, but like, Cube is not Legacy. Like, not everyone's running 4 copies of Brainstorm. I think this is a very good card, but I think it is probably still a slam dunk in my cube, but I don't think it, like, this is probably the card I think most people are hyped about from the set, just in terms of just raw power level. I would agree it's a strong card, but I think people need to kind of lower the expectations a little bit. It'll play very well.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think it is going to be contextually very good in a lot of spots, though. Like, the fact you get that ping on ETB means it's not just good against the people who draw Grunt Punch for extra cards. It's also good against the Llanowar Elf people, and it's good against the Ragavan people. It's a lot of decks are going to have either be drawing extra cards or have good X1s to target, right? And then also you can have synergies within your own deck, right? If you're, for example, playing the Sacrifice deck, this is 2 bodies for 2 mana that gets you some amount of value. I think the card's definitely strong. It's I wouldn't have it down as maybe the slam dunk people might think, extrapolating from a format like Legacy, where I think the hype probably is deserved. But yeah, certainly a strong card. Even if you don't really have any synergies with it, I think it's a good card, and there are definitely ways you can build around it to make it better, whether that be wheels or just a way to get extra bodies out of the card. Also, even nice with something like Dak Faden. You can just target them with the plus. They draw 2, discard 2, and you kill that creature. It's pretty good.
I think a lot of the hype around this card just comes from, like, we've all been hurt by Nekasar and Commander. We've all seen what those things can do.
Yeah. Some of us repeatedly.
Yes.
Nice. Next up, we have Moria Marauder. This is red for a creature goblin warrior. It's a 1/1 double strike. And it says, whenever a goblin or orc you control deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. If you're, obviously, I don't think this is good enough as just a 1/1. If I hit you, I get to exile the top 2 and play them. Like, that card will win some games, but is just a bit fragile. It's going to be too hard to get it through most of the time. But if you're in the Goblins deck, which is a real deck for people putting cubes, it's red-black Goblins or mono-red Goblins is kind of a classic cube archetype. This can really go off. It's very notable. A lot of a lot of these cards now say whenever one or more goblins deal combat damage to your opponent. This does not say that. If you hit them with 5 goblins, you will exile the top 5, and you can play any number of them. That will run away with games pretty quickly. So notable, it is only until end of turn. You see some of these effects now until the end of your next turn. So, and that means it's, you can't play this on turn 2 and hit them with your 1-drop goblin and immediately get value because you probably can't play the card right away. But later in the game, this is just going to make every time you get through with a goblin, you're really going to start snowballing and never missing land drops. I think this is a really good card for goblin. I think this is one of the better goblin playoffs you can have. I think, especially at 2 mana, this is really strong. It's notable it's red-red. If your goblin's deck is red-black, you have to work a bit for this. You need the fixing. But yeah, I think it's well worth it. I think it's a really strong goblin playoff.
No, exactly. And so I agree with all that, but I do think this is going to go in a cube with goblins, but the deck that it goes in after that doesn't necessarily, I think, have to be a full goblin deck, because this has double strike. If this gets through, you will get to play the 2 cards, and if you the floor for a 2-mana 1/1 double strike is quite low. Like, if you have any way of buffing this power, if you can put a counter on it, if you can give it a bit of equipment, then it's going to hit like a truck. It's going to be very tricky for it to deal with it. So yeah, it gets in a cube if you have goblins, but in the draft environment, it doesn't necessarily just have to be in the goblin deck, which I think is some nice flexibility, because if you just read this as a aggressive creature that effectively draws you 2 cards on a turn, that's still very solid.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, I think it's a lot better, even if you're not in the goblin deck. It's very meaningfully better if you have, say, 4 or 5 goblins in your deck to having 0 or 1 other goblins. But yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah. But the times you can get it through, maybe you have a lot of removal, you can get their blockers out of the way. Still exiling 2 cards. That is plenty. Yeah, for sure.
No, definitely. Well, from one card that cares about goblins to a card you are running specifically if you don't care about goblins, we're talking about Rally at the Hornburg. It is a 1 red for a sorcery. When you cast it, you create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens. Humans you control gain haste until the end of turn. So we've seen plenty of effects that 1 red for a sorcery that makes 2 tokens. Generally, things like Krenko's Command you might see in goblin decks kind of like overlap with like the spells meta decks that we mentioned earlier. This is kind of fills the same slot. Like, if you have a red blue, red black, or kind of like a Grixis kind of spellsy matters deck, and you also happen to have a human deck, then this is a very solid role player. It does 2 things that you want, so therefore it can be worth a cube slot for those reasons.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, even something like red, white, or Naya tokens could use something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're running the Krenko's Command stuff now and you don't care about them being goblins, you just want 2 tokens for 2 mana, well, this is just better, right? Because they come with haste. Or there was the one from Ikoria where one of them has haste.
Oh yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it like a human and a beast or something like that?
Yeah, some weird creature type for the other one. Yeah, this is better than that card. It'll have its niche. Not one for most cubes, but one to be aware of for sure. All right, next up we have Spiteful Banditry. This is X red for an enchantment. When Spiteful Banditry enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to each creature. And whenever 1 or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, as just a board wipe to kill everything, this is pretty expensive, right? This is 4 mana for a Pyroclasm. It's 5 mana for an Anger of Gods. However, scaling board wipes, where you get to choose the value, are really powerful. because you get to set it up in a way where, maybe you trade off your lower toughness creatures, and then you get to banditry away their multiple X2s and X1s, whilst you're left with some free toughness creatures. And that's really good. Like, anyone who's played with Meat Hook Massacre, this is the closest Red gets to it. It also will almost always make you a treasure when you cast it, and then continue to generate some amount of treasures throughout the game. The fact this is gated to only once each turn, I mean, it's like, I think you're not in it for the treasure. That's not like a synergy piece you're after. It's not sort of an engine in that way, because one treasure is just not going to be enough if that's really what you're going for. But it will be nice incidental value. And I think this is fine. It's not. It's weirdly, I think you kind of want it in a deck with creatures, because, well, if you don't have creatures of your own, then you'd rather just be playing like Anger of the Gods or Pyroclasm or whatever. But I can also see it in, like, maybe you have a red-green deck where you have some beefy stuff. You want to be able to use this. Maybe you kill some small creatures whilst you keep your larger ones. I kind of suspect it ends up just being a bit too expensive, mana-wise, for what you're getting out of it. And you'd rather just have something you can cast a turn earlier. But I think it's not an unreasonable one to try.
No, I think that's fair. I think at some point this definitely did not have the text, this ability triggers only once each turn on it. I think this was definitely like, let's make the red Meat Hook Massacre, and then they realized that would be awful. Or no, that'd be very, very good and a bit too busted. This won't make you anywhere near as much treasures as you actually want, because if you're at a point in these decks where you are removing a creature every turn, then you're probably already winning. Like, you're not going to be using your removal till like in theory, this will kind of this is a board wipe that sets you up a little bit, and by little bit I mean 1 mana. It gives you a Lotus Petal for the next turn. That might not be good enough.
Yeah. And the thing is, if there's just going to be too many spots where they have, if they have a 4/4, this is 6 mana before you can kill it. I think there are just going to be a few too many spots where you'll just wish you had something a bit more efficient.
No, exactly. And just traditionally, like, I don't think I've ever run a board wipe in red. It's not something that color particularly wants you to be doing. Like, it's of colors in cube, I think red is probably like second or third in terms of most likely to be committing creatures to the board. Like, obviously, like, green is probably first because you have all the mana dorks and that kind of stuff. That's kind of a big part of what it's trying to do. But red's not too far behind that, just in terms of you want to be putting stuff on the board. Do you actually want a board wipe in your deck?
Yeah,
I think will come up quite a bit of the time. Like, maybe like Chunky Boros. Maybe that's actually where this goes.
I mean, I think if its best home is Chunky Boros, we can probably safely consign this one to the scrap heap.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, blue-red will occasionally run a board wipe, but then, like, I don't see an upside really of this over, just a Pyroclasm in that deck.
Okay, we're going to end the episode there. Do make sure you are subscribed so you're notified when the next episode, when part 2, comes out in a couple of days or so. And also, please check out our podcast, Power for Nothing, if you like people talking about magic. But anyway, until next time, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.